Thank you very much. And just to continue on, Maurice has given you a good bit of the history of what happened on the bog. And I suppose in tandem with this, as always, there was lots of things going on at different times and different funding and different inputs. And I suppose this developed fairly organically over the last number of years because there's been such an amount of projects happening and being driven by different partners that I suppose about 2 years ago we started to meet as a group and look at this whole idea of a metal and look at this whole idea of working together, because everybody was doing, Quilcha had their life projects, National Parks and Wildlife were with Annette and Morris doing a huge amount of work and had a huge amount of work done in terms of looking at the ecology of the bog. And then we had an opportunity back in 2012 through Meath County Council involved in another project. We were involved with Interreg, which was a project called Action for Biodiversity. And we did that with Girley and one of the other speakers here today as well, Marcus, and 10 local authorities. And part of that was to pick a local site in each county and to do some direct conservation work in the county. So for the site for me that we looked at was Girley Bog, and we had funding then to get Queen's University in Flynn down to do a hydrological study of the bog, and we also then were able to provide funding for Joanne Denyer to do an ecotope survey of the bog. So we were beginning to get real hard data as well, in tandem with looking at what was happening and in terms of the management of it. So it worked very well together. So we had a big event in Navan where we made a presentation of the hydrology at National Parks and Wildlife offices, and we had a number of local partners and the communities that came to it. So out of that really we started to meet more formally. And I suppose the key point of here was that it wasn't just state agencies, it wasn't just government agencies. A huge amount of the success of Girley Bog is driven by the people who use it on a daily basis and driven by the community who are very passionate about it and really have been the champions of it and have kept it, in the limelight and kept it pushing and kept it on the agenda. And I suppose part of the history, if you like, of this work was the different agencies coming together and the different agencies then working together. And we found a huge benefit in that, because even a lot of the projects that's been delivered, when you have that many people around the table, not everyone can do, and one agency can't do it all, but having that experience and having the locals working very much with you as well, they can do an awful lot and they can get an awful lot done an awful lot quicker sometimes than the agencies of the state can move, and I think that's fair to say. So the NGOs as well brought a huge impetus in terms of on the ground and in terms of mobilising conservation volunteers, empowering and building capacity with events that they have. So all of that really has been what's been happening out there for a number of years, and I suppose what now we're beginning to formalise even more. And when I say formalise, it's a very informal structure, but the formal bit is that we sit down and meet and share and collaborate on a regular basis. And I suppose it harks back to this old Irish tradition really of coming together for a common purpose. And I suppose working together, I suppose that each of us can achieve the goals. And I suppose that's been, not necessarily a lot of stories of that happening at peatland sites. So it's important, I think, where it does happen, that we try and continue that work and continue investing that time and continue working with all of the people to try and bring that, I suppose, ethos and bring that partnership, to deliver the results that it is delivering. And in terms of what happens down there now on an annual basis, we have a very detailed programme of events that happens. The IPCC have been very involved in leading those through Biodiversity Day, through Heritage Week, through having engagement with particularly some of the local businesses who come on board and building capacity. They've done leaflets, which are down at the back of the room, visitor guides, which again complements the loop walk as well, and people can take around with them when they're on the walk. And again, really, it's just about celebrating the habitat and celebrating what's on the bog. The other aspect of what we're doing at the moment, and a key part of the work programme at the moment, is we're now developing an action plan for the next 10 years for the bog. So we've got to the point now where the work that's there and the work that's been done over the last number of years, we're now sitting down and beginning this process. We had our first meeting of it on the 30th of April and developed a questionnaire which is just the front page of it is there, it's online, it's on the IPC homepage if you want to go in and fill it in. And really the first step really is to ask and engage with the public who use the site and to say, well, what do you want to see for the future of it? Because it's your bog, and how do you want to see it managed? What are the kind of things that need to be done from a kind of conservation perspective? What are the kind of things and actions that really we want to start building in? So we can start building them into work programs, we can start looking for funding and, you know, doing this in a bit more formal way, I suppose, but also in a bit more proactive as well, because we have a lot of the agencies now on board and we'll be able to try and build up this programme of work. And this will really be the guiding plan and the guiding vision for Girley Bog over the next 10 years. And as part of that, the IPCC and the Meath also did a top 10 of what's really important about Girley Bog. And this went out in tandem with the questionnaire, and this is going out now to all of the houses and all of the community people who live in the area, and it will be distributed, it is being distributed as we speak, and it will also be through the schools as well, so that people get a sense of why it is what's important about the site, why are we interested in it in the first place, and I suppose what makes it special as well. And a lot of people, you know what makes it special, but it's good again just to raise the profile of the site. I suppose like any site, I think anybody who works in conservation and anybody who tries to kind of look at how do you get people interested in a site, how do you sustain that interest. I think, you know, the important thing to say here is that, you know, the walk and the people that use the site, and there was a very strong cohort of local people who had been using the site for many, many years and pushing it and promoting it. And then I suppose with the opening of the walk, brought a whole new audience of people into the bog. And that, again, was important. And it's something now that's very embedded in the community, and it's something that I suppose, particularly in County Meath, we don't have many places like this, and that's where it becomes really important as well. Meath is a very agricultural county, it's got very developed grasslands, and spaces like this are quite rare in the county, and I suppose that makes it, I think, from our perspective, and certainly from my perspective, more important as well, because we're not just looking at it in the national context. I tend to look at these sites in the county context of where I work, and then, you know, kind of assign them kind of a relative value in that sphere. But just last Sunday, there was over 200 people on the bog with a charity walk. And again, this happens every year, happens a couple of times a year. There's also, in September, breast cancer awareness walk. So it's, you know, it's very much embedded in the life of the community, and it's very much seen as a kind of a place where people can go and people can engage in walking and engage in recreation as well. And I suppose it's also the hen capital of Ireland as well, and I think that's where its name is quite apt. We have a local business called Causey Farm, and they have built an ecotourism business around their farm and turned their farm into kind of, you can go and bake traditional Irish bread, you can experience a farm, but also you can experience, they own a little bit of, on the very edge of Girley Bog and some of the cutover, and they bring people out and throw them into the bog and get their feet dirty, and people love it and absolutely cannot get enough of it. But you know, they have 70,000, they've only opened a few years, they have 70,000 visitors a year. So they employ a lot of local students and local people as well. So there's an economic value in that, particularly in a very rural part of Meath where, you know, that tourism and that energy can be built around. And the IPCC have been working with the people who own the farm, and they've trained up all their guides now and to do the guide in terms of ecology. So they're very interested, and they're on board now, and when we have our meetings, we have them in their farm, we have the meetings there with their scones, and they look after us very well. But, you know, so that's part of, I suppose, what's happened and the kind of the network, and I suppose the effect of working together, because that has been driven by the community, it's been driven by then having to access to the people who are sitting around the table and being able to provide that. So when we can do the training, we're down there, we're given a guided walk, we can take your guides, we come down and do a workshop with the people who work in the farm. So that's kind of what's been happening. And it's very much in a very relaxed and fun-filled environment. And I think we have to make these places attractive in the sense that people want to spend time there, and that people, when they go there, they have a very memorable experience. And then lots of people in Meath go there in terms of school trips, and it's one of their best trips that they do all year. Now the parents aren't too happy when they go home and see what arrives home to them, but they're very, very happy when they're there. There's also ongoing research at the moment. We have in the audience two people, one who's completed a master's and one who's currently completing a master's on Girley bog. So that's something that's developing as well, and these are local people who again have been going back and using the local site and finding out more information. And Kate's work is looking at the social history of Girley bog and interviewing people and finding out what was it like for the last number of years, how was it used, how was it, what did people think of it, and that's quite interesting, to plot that and to have a look at that. And that kind of links back a little bit to what Christopher Briggs was talking about this morning, is the whole cultural element around peatlands, and I suppose how much of these sites and how much peatlands are very much in our history and very much part of, particularly Ireland, because most of us, or a lot of us, grew up not too far from wetlands, and certainly they've always been a feature in a lot of rural Ireland. And again, I suppose the recreational value, I've kind of touched on that already, but there are daily users out there. There are people who go out there on a very regular basis, and that's kind of, I suppose, had a couple of benefits. One, not least of which, it's been the watchdog as well, because there was a lot of dumping on the bog, and that was a huge problem. But now, we're getting calls very regularly. Within about a day of something being dumped there, there'll be a call into the local authority. So that is even already happening, and there's more effort being going and doing community cleanups and all of that work as well. So that's a collaborative process as well. And I suppose just the sharing of knowledge, that having the different agencies and having the community and having us all sitting around in an equal playing field has, and what that has kind of brought out. So really, I suppose, I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave it, but that's really, I suppose, and it's been a long history, it hasn't happened overnight. These things don't. I think one of the things about collaboration is that you have to give it the time. You have to be, you have to be consistent as well in your kind of approach to it, and you have to be able to show delivery of projects. And I understand that, sometimes time frames can be frustrating, particularly for community groups who want things done, straight away, and then we have to go through different processes. But I think, by the work that Morris and Annette have been doing there and what they've been building up and building up, that has kind of developed then into a body that, makes it much more, I suppose, quicker and able to deliver a lot of very, very good projects on the ground. In terms of the capacity building, that's something that's ongoing and something that will be ongoing, and we'll be looking for, volunteers and ambassadors for the bog in terms of people who want to come and do education programs, and that's something we'll be building up, and I'm sure will feature a lot in the action plan that's coming up. And I suppose in terms of the tourism and biodiversity value and looking at these as assets and looking at these as natural assets, it's something that Girley bog has now, we've just recently adopted, the members of Meath County Council, a new county biodiversity plan, and Girley bog has been embedded as an action within that, so again to continue that working. So that gives a good kind of framework, if you like, for us to kind of continue on and I suppose link in terms of funding perhaps down the line as well. So I just want to end by dedicating the talk to a local man who was really the champion, because all these places need champions. At the end of the day, we all have various roles and more wider remits, but when it comes to a local place, it's usually a local person that really is the driver. And Christy was somebody who championed really the dumping. There was a very severe problem with dumping on the bog in the early 1990s, and he really just single-handedly almost, highlighted that and won an Ellison Award and was recognised by Antashka for that work, and he recently passed away. So again, I'm just here as one person, but really most of this work has been driven by the community and all of the other partners. So thank you.